Alright, what's going on, everybody? Finally back. Had like a year little hiatus there. If you've seen the last video, threw some pictures in there where I was at and what I was doing a little bit. But in today's video, we will be making a flag table. So, got a customer order out in California. So, if you actually see this video, this is your table. Gonna be the exact same table what I got here in the garage. So it's gonna be American flag table with the 1776 and the 13 stars pattern. Basically almost 100% identical to what I got. Over here on my table, I've got my smaller boards, my 1x2s, which will make up the top, and then the trim and the legs. And then over here I have my 1x4s, which will be the trim for the top piece. And then there should be some offcuts of this, which will go underneath to support the actual tabletop itself and provide some actual structure underneath. I will be using my Ridgid miter saw and my Reekon M1 measuring tool to help kind of with the rapid cuts. I don't have enough cuts of one size to justify using a stop block, so this is where my Reekon M1 comes in beautifully handy, because I have about a half dozen of each kind of length of cut, and so being able to very quickly get the measurements, accurate measurements on here, make my cuts, and then move on to the next set of measurements without, like I said, having to set up a stop block for each one, or to sit here and kind of fiddle fart around with the tape measure to make sure my cuts are accurate every time. So that should make this go pretty quick. Super simple table design, pretty much just straight cuts all the way around except for the trim, which is just simple 45-degree bevel cuts or miter cuts. That should be super easy to put together. I'm expecting this to only take a couple hours, and that includes cutting, staining, finishing, and getting it packed up and ready to go out to California, like I said. So it's going to be a little bit different than this one, because I have to make it ship ready and then figure out a way to pack it efficiently and safely so that it does get there without it being damaged or anything like that. So I'm going to get started, and I'll meet you guys at the end. Done some few cuts here, and I'm just gonna kind of talk about the Reekon tool. I know I have a video on it. I'll throw a link in the description if you guys want to watch a video just specifically about this Reekon M1 tool. But as you can see, as I roll this, it adjusts the measurements, and so I'm being extremely efficient with the lumber I have. I'm leaving maybe about an inch of scrap on each piece. Basically what I do is go to my measurement, which is 14 1/4, get my 2 cuts, and then I will move, after I do my cut, push the workpiece up to the blade, hit the big reset button, and then we'll go up to the other piece that I'm cutting out of here, which is 21 1/4. And then once I get close, just make a little adjustments. Once again, I'm looking for that X to make me right on the line there, right on the mark for my measurement. And then we'll just piece out over here, and as you can see, it's almost right on the money at 21 1/4. Reset again and do the same process. And as I've been doing before, as I get towards the end of the board here, what I do is I'll take a scrap piece and butt it up to this one that I'm going to cut, and then I'll just very carefully push it through, make sure I maintain pressure on the board. And get to 1/4, and then I can roll this piece back, and then we'll make our cut. And as you see, that's all I have for scrap for all these boards so far. And then that same piece that I just cut is once again right at 21 1/4. So even doing that method right now, push a scrap piece through, it's still coming out just fine on the measurements. Makes this very efficient when you're trying to get everything you can out of a board. Okay, so we have finished doing our cuts on the miter saw, at least for now. Now we got our stack of materials here. So on the back side, we have the long stripes at the bottom of the table. So there's 6 of those if you look at that guy over there. So you got 3 red, 3 white. These middle rows here are the 2 long pieces of trim. So this wider boards will be obviously for the top. These are for the bottom. And then down here we have the 7 remaining stripes. So the shorter ones, or I guess these longer ones of the 7 will be the red and white stripes. And then this little stack in the middle here is where the blue part of the flag will be. And then finally on the end here is the legs. And then these will get glued and nailed like so, with the long side being where it'll be on the long side of the table. So there's 8 pieces of there, 2 for each corner, 7, 7, 2 and 2 for the top and bottom of the little trim, and then, like I said, 6 for that. In total, that was 10.5 of the 1x2s, and basically 1.5 of these 1x4s. You could essentially get away with 2 of the 6-foot 1x4s, but I got 8-footers instead. So now all I have left is do some quick sanding on all of these pieces, and then these trim pieces right here at the end I'll do some miters on the corner, and that way it'll fit nice, look a little bit more professional. So I won't do that until the very end, or towards the very end, until I get kind of all of this put together and I can kind of get those final dimensions and make sure it's a nice snug fit. Very similar to what I did on this table. So as you can see, it's a pretty tight fit. There's a little bit of gaps here and there, but nothing too crazy. And this was the first table I ever made. Pretty old design, or not old design, but an old table. It's been in my garage for 7 years now. Still looks great. So I'm really happy with the quality that these boards put out, which is awesome. So like I said, I'm gonna get to sanding, and then we'll come back when we are doing some staining and actual assembly. I'll show you kind of how I put the top together to make it nice and secure. Cut and sanded. The only thing we have left to do for cutting and kind of finish work on that end of it is doing the trim pieces. And like I said earlier, I want to get the pieces kind of painted first. So these pieces here will be the red stripes on the flag. So the 3 long ones obviously go on the bottom, and then these 4 will be on the top portion. And then these pieces over here will be where the blue portion of the flag is. Blue portion of the flag here, these will all be painted blue. These ones will be red. Obviously in between it'd be white. They're just kind of bare pieces. And then same on the bottom, these will also be painted red. So we're going to be using some Rustoleum Ultra Cover Gloss Colonial Red for the red stripes. And then same thing for the blue, it's just a navy blue for the blue portion. Relatively simple process, just go through paint. I only need to paint one edge or one side of it. I will go over kind of the in-between edges a little bit. That way if there is any small gaps in the boards as we're kind of squeezing it together, it kind of hides that a little bit by having a little bit of paint bleed over the sides. So that way, for example, let's say there's these 2 boards together and there might be a little bit of a gap here and there. Once it's all together, whatever small gaps there might be in between the boards, like I said, you won't notice it because the paint will kind of fill in those gaps a little bit for you. Same goes with the blue portion. Go over all the edges, and then once this one dries, we'll go and lay our stencil on that will have the star and 1776 pattern in there, and then we'll fill it in with same paint, just in a white, and then it'll all get trimmed up. That's going to be trimmed in a Dark Walnut stain by Varathane. So 2 different paint brands or stain brands. It's not the end of the world, but the legs and everything else will be that Dark Walnut, which you kind of see in a lot of my projects. And then to kind of assemble this, because it's all kind of jumbled up, what we'll use is some kind of scrap pieces of this 1x4. I'll kind of finish it up a little bit to make it a little bit nicer. And then essentially what will happen is on the bottom side of the table, there'll be 3 pieces like this, 1 on each end. So 1 over here, 1 over on this end, and then there'll be 1 kind of, not really in the middle, but where the blue portion of the flag meets the rest of the flag, just because there's going to be a seam there. We want to make sure that's nice and sturdy, and it kind of ends up being right about the middle of the table. So it works out pretty good to add extra support there. And then to attach that, we'll just do 2 pocket holes on each end of the board. So 1 on each end, and that'll get screwed into the side trim of the table itself. And then when we're attaching the actual panel piece, or the longer board pieces to these end pieces, there'll be a little bit of glue and then some nails from the bottom side up. So that way when you're looking at the finished surface of the table, you won't see any nails, screws, nothing like that. You shouldn't see any fasteners. The only thing you'll see is just that seam on the boards here, because in the past when I made the first table, I found that if I tried to kind of tape the line here and then stain or paint one end and leave the other one either red or unfinished, there was a lot of bleed over and it just didn't look right. So it's actually easier and looks cleaner to just essentially have the boards cut and then just finish them that way, and then kind of reassemble it all at the end. So I'm going to get painting on these, and then once they dry, we will get some more of these pieces cut to then assemble it all together nice and tight, and then we'll move on to final assembly and kind of setting it up to be ready to ship. Got all of our main pieces of their first kind of coat of finish here on them. So as you see, I got the flag kind of laid out here, put some clamps on it to get it nice and tight. I want to make sure I get this line where the blue meets kind of the rest of it nice and perfect. The next step is, now that I've got this kind of laid out, I've got my back brace pieces here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to flip the whole flag portion over, and then we'll nail, using my Ryobi 18-gauge nailer, we'll nail these braces on. Like I said earlier, we'll have 1 on each end, and then 1 in the middle here where this kind of seam is on the top of that flag there. And that will tie the whole top together. And these boards have pocket holes in them. So once it's completed, it'll be like this. And so the flag part will be on top of here. And then these will be what secures essentially the top to the side portions, which are over here. And then once I said, once I get this kind of all tied together, I'll come through with my track saw and I'll clean up these edges so they're nice and square and straight, and there's not any kind of waves on both ends here. And then from there, I can do my final cuts on the trim pieces for the top and that little kind of bottom rail piece. And then it's just final assembly on everything, and then a coat or 2 of a polyurethane to give it a nice smooth finish, kind of seal in the wood, so that way it's nice long lasting, just like the table I got over there originally. So it should be relatively quick process today. And then also I got the stencil made for the star pattern. So before I obviously put any poly on, I'll be doing the star pattern here, but I can't do that until I have the tabletop, this portion all tied together. done. Next, we'll be putting the stencil on over here. So I got stencil over there on the original table. Peel it, lick and stick essentially, and then take our white paint, color in the stars on the 1776 portion, let that dry, and then once that dries, then we can come back, like I said, with the track saw and clean up these edges, just because there's a little bit of variation with the boards, and just try to get everything to fit, especially with some of these having a little bit of curve and such. So I want to make sure this edge is nice and clean and straight. Same with this back edge here. Just clean up those edges just a little bit. And then from there, we can get that final dimensions of the top itself and make our cuts and then do final assembly. And then we'll come back once it's all done and ready to go to be shipped.